Our next guest says this policy is a quick fix and something quite opposite to what she is recommending. Rebekah Young is the Vice President and Head of Inclusion and Resilience Economics at Scotiabank, and she released a report today calling on the government to make some big changes on immigration policy. Rebekah joins us now from Halifax. Thanks so much for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So a coincidental timing here, perhaps, with releasing your report the same day that this is happening, but you're calling for some pretty significant changes. How do you view what they've put on the table today?
Well, first I would say not so coincidental. We know that population growth was explosive, and the minister himself acknowledged that the work visa side of things really, it was coming. We just didn't know exactly when. So we did put out this report with two key messages. And one was, yes, we've got to lower the number, but not just lower the number. We have to focus on raising the bar as well. So thinking about through an economic lens, how do we raise the potential? And, that could even mean increasing, beyond some of the, not the current population, but bringing in a bit more. So, what we saw today is that they are lowering that number. So they're putting kind of more measures in place to bring in the non-temporary side of things, but not really a lot on the raising the bar side of things, looking through an economic lens of how to get more out of our immigration program.
Before we get to how they could possibly do that, can you just give us some context on how much this category of temporary residents has grown in recent years?
Well, last year in 2023, the net inflow of non-permanent residents was about 800,000. And keep in mind, permanent resident admissions were about 470,000. So that, vastly outnumbers the number of PR targets that the federal government sets every year. So it really has exploded because prior to the pandemic, that non-permanent category was really very small. And so where we are today is we've got that 2.5 million in the country, and the minister didn't reference the 300 to 600,000 undocumented workers that he's acknowledged before. And so he's got two issues to deal with. One is the folks that are in the country now on a non-permanent basis under the expectations or the hopes that they would become permanent that he's trying to deal with, but he's also got this forward-looking basis of the ones that want to come into the country. So I would say he's focused on bringing the number down, dealing with the massive, buildup in people that are in the country now. It's less forward-looking, kind of in a more inspirational, how do we think about our immigration program as a core strength for Canada, for the welfare of Canadians.
Rebekah, you wrote in your report today, too, something that jumped out to me. You said temporary is the new permanent. So often temporary residents end up becoming permanent residents. Just how often does that happen?
Well, over the course of the pandemic, so the last 3 years, very approximately a third of permanent residents are already in the country across the different non-permanent categories. And so when I do the quick math, basically I think to get to their target of reducing the population of non-permanent to 5% over the next 3 years, he can largely do that through attrition. And he indicated that in the press release. He said, we're going to, really encourage drawdowns, domestic drawdowns. So that's his language for saying, let's look at who's in the country that is non-permanent that we can pull into the permanent streams. And so that is, I think that they can actually get to, to where they want to go by attrition and pretty flat growth, which at the end of the day, what we care as economists and, as folks thinking about real constraints like housing is what is that net number of new people that'll be coming into the country. And, so I would very approximately say, based on today's announcement, we're talking probably 500,000 population growth once they start executing. So we know they still need consultations, they need to set their targets, and so that could be some time yet.
So if the government were to do more of a policy reset, as you describe it, Rebekah, how could they prioritize economic strength, putting that first?
Well, I think a very first start would just be articulating what the goal of economic immigration is, and I put that, I stress economic because rightly there are other categories that have other objectives. But if we first articulate that the goal of economic immigration is to enhance the welfare over the medium term of all Canadians, that gives you a pretty articulate goal of how you measure who is coming into the country and what jobs they are filling. And in fact, we're quite lucky in Canada because we have very extensive and predictive data from longitudinal data that we can know in advance, by and large, which newcomers are going to, be able to contribute substantially in that regard. So I think we can use those sorts of tools, but we also need more of a higher bar for business. And we didn't hear that today. We heard that there are going to be more hurdles for business to prove that there isn't anyone in the country, but we didn't hear anything about, how are the businesses that are going to be the businesses that drive growth tomorrow? How are they going to be rewarded with workers, whether within Canada or abroad? So there are a number of metrics like that, I think, that can really kind of strengthen this focus at looking at immigration as a source of growth and longer term welfare for Canadians over the medium term.
Well, and immigration has been such a focus in the past few months, Rebekah, so we'll be listening for any further changes, perhaps. Maybe they'll be listening as well to what you put out there. Rebekah, thanks so much for joining us. That's Rebekah Young, Vice President and Head of Inclusion and Resilience Economics at Scotiabank, joining us from Halifax tonight.